Now we turn to the quarterback situation, and that seems to be the only thing wrong with this football team or the program right now, is identifying the best quarterback for the job and getting him developed and ready to play at a high level to lead what is an elite roster. So we've gone through, of course, Stetson Bennett after D'Wan Mathis played 2 quarters against Arkansas, back to Mathis against Florida for a certain amount of time after Stetson Bennett and the Bulldogs got behind by a couple scores. And now it appears as though JT Daniels will finally be on the field against Mississippi State.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting debut. I definitely know the people around here in Athens are excited to see that debut. And what we're assuming will be Daniels trotting out with the first team. It's definitely been a roller coaster ride for Georgia's quarterback situation here. Going back to last season, with Jake Fromm in the mix, 3rd year starting quarterback, and he had far from his best of seasons. But as much as that was on him, it was also on the wide receivers and offensive play calling and such. And so he ends up leaving after his 3 seasons as the starting quarterback. Georgia picks up grad transfer Jamie Newman out of Wake Forest. They end up picking up JT Daniels in May, late May, early June, transfer from USC. Looks like it'll be a competition between those two. Ends up being that Newman was the expected starter before he ends up opting out. Like you said, D'Wan Mathis starts the season opener, goes 2 quarters before being replaced by Stetson Bennett, who has started every game since. So, we're to the point where, like I said, it's been a roller coaster of quarterback play. Bennett had his moments against Auburn, against Tennessee, but as of late, it has not been great. 6 interceptions in the last 10 quarters to just 2 touchdowns, dating back to halftime of that Alabama game. They were shut out in the second half against the Crimson Tide, only put up 14 points against Kentucky, and both those came on the ground, and then put up 2 touchdowns against Florida through the air, one of which came from D'Wan Mathis. So, I think the fact that they went to Mathis in that Florida game is probably more a result of him being the second string guy for much of the season because of JT Daniels and his injury history. And him coming off of a knee injury that he suffered at USC. I think he's been coming back from that. Kirby Smart says his mobility continues to get better. I don't think there's any question about his arm talent and his arm strength. He's been throwing with the scout team here in Athens, and I think, there's a lot of excitement to see what he can do when he gets out on the field under the Sanford Stadium lights on Saturday night.
Bennett comes in against Arkansas, and nobody was ever going to expect him to be the type quarterback that could carry the offense. He was just never that guy, never expected to be that guy. But he put together 3 very capable games against Arkansas, Auburn, and Tennessee. And Auburn probably is the best defense out of those 3. One of the probably top 4 or 5 units in the SEC. So he manages the game well. He makes the right reads, makes the right throws, doesn't make mistakes. Again, not going to throw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, but makes the right decisions and puts together nice games in which they score points. And then suddenly, the first half against Alabama, there are chinks in the armor, and you see him make a few mistakes, but they're in the game, and he's putting points on the board, 20 in the first half, and then, or 24 in the first half. And then it all kind of unravels from there, and he starts making all sorts of glaring mistakes, and then that carried into the Florida game. Do you think, do you have any theory? I know it's all conjecture. We all watched the same performance, but based on what you're hearing out of players and coaches, and just based on your more in-depth analysis of Georgia football, what happened to Stetson Bennett?
Yeah, I think he lost his confidence. You saw, in those early games, he was walking around with the swagger. He came in, saved the day against Arkansas, was the guy, had everyone calling for the mailman, Heisman, not necessarily a favorite, but he was up there. He had Heisman odds. And I think that there was a lot of talk about him and his story and what he was doing. And all of a sudden, like you said, they showed chinks in that armor against Alabama in the first half. And then in the second half, he gets a ball batted, intercepted, had a bad play where he rolled out towards the sideline, threw back across the middle of the field, and he was the first to admit that he did not play well enough for Georgia to win that game. I think you could tell that he was upset after that game. You could tell that, like I said, he seemed to have lost a little bit of his confidence. And you started to hear the Georgia fans calling for a quarterback change. JT Daniels is on the sideline. He's his former 5-star, and I get it. I get Georgia fans wanting to see that, especially, given the history of Georgia quarterbacks, and the 5-stars that they've brought in and haven't worked out here between Jacob Eason and Justin Fields. And I think there were a lot of fans that were scared this would be just another, Eason or Fields, that he would be here for a year, maybe 2, and not get his chance. Looking back on those situations, obviously hindsight is 20/20 vision. But at the time, I don't think that there was a choice. You had to roll with Fromm in both those scenarios, given the fact that, in 2017, he came in for Eason, led the team to a big win at Notre Dame, led them to the SEC championship. Once Eason was back, you couldn't go away from Fromm. And that was kind of the same narrative in 2018. You couldn't go away from the guy that had just led you to the SEC championship and was on the brink of a national championship. So I think, it's a different scenario, but I think that Georgia fans were calling for a quarterback change. I think, whenever you hear that, as much as these players block out the outside noise, they know what's happening. They know, they hear it. And I think, Stetson Bennett probably lost some of his confidence, and it just, it started to build up, all the negative energy started to build up and ultimately resulted in him being banged up against Florida, having an AC joint sprain. And so then he tries to push through it, goes into the locker room, gets a shot, comes back out, tries to push through the pain. Kirby Smart said he just wasn't accurate enough, looked timid in the pocket. And so, they end up rolling with Mathis against Missouri, in the week leading up to the game that was supposed to be against Missouri, turns into a bye week. Bennett can't throw early on in the week. And so, they've got to, look elsewhere and here comes Daniels taking the first team reps. And so I think that's what's brought us to this point where, it looks like JT Daniels is going to be the starter on Saturday night against Mississippi State. Stetson Bennett has a great story. I think, everyone will think fondly of him for what he's done, in his time as Georgia's starting quarterback, and no one's going to, diminish what he did. But, I do think if the Daniels, experiment, let's call it that, goes the way that Georgia fans hope, I think a lot of people will be questioning, would this have happened early in the year? Was he just not healthy enough to take the job, or was Bennett really our best guy? So, I think in terms of a Georgia fan's perspective, I think, like I said, there's a lot of excitement to see what JT Daniels can do. And in terms of what happened to Stetson Bennett, I think he just lost his confidence.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We discuss, debate, and analyze the sport that we all love each and every day. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell for the notifications. We go live multiple times each day, talking to guys like Palmer Toms here from Dogs 247 Sports, call-in shows all over the place, so lock it in. What did you see when you saw D'Wan Mathis step on the field against Florida? And I know that he was recruited across the board by all the huge schools, so I don't think everybody missed on this, or Georgia missed on it, because he could have gone just about anywhere, but he looked like a running back playing quarterback to me.
And he looked that way against Arkansas too. Trying to get outside of the pocket maybe a little bit too early, and he missed on some open throws, and that's not to say Bennett didn't miss on open throws early in that game. And that, who knows if Daniels will miss on those open throws. Kirby Smart calls those layups. He's said repeatedly since that game, you got to hit your layups. You got to make your layups. And so, for Georgia, I think that was the problem with Mathis. He did throw a nice ball across the middle to Kearis Jackson for a touchdown, but, the defender slipped there. So, who knows what happens if that defender is able to make a play on the ball. But, ultimately, I think what happened with Mathis is, you got to be able, like Kirby Smart said, you got to hit those layups, and you can't miss open receivers. Georgia had a chance. As much as they were down in that first half and headed into the second half, they had a chance. There was a chance that they could have gotten back in that game, had they hit some of those layups. They had open receivers, with behind the defense and just overthrew guys. And so, I think that's probably what happened there. He's just missing his open receivers, and that's something that you can't do as an SEC quarterback, especially if you are playing for a program like Georgia that wants to win a national championship.
Looking back at JT Daniels' one starting season at USC, it's a bit underwhelming, but we'll put it into context. Just a shade under 60%, 14 touchdowns, 10 picks, about 2,600 yards passing. He had near elite wide receiver play, but the offensive line was horrendous for that team. They only went 5-7, and it's got to be put into context as well that he was basically stepping off a high school campus, missed his last year of high school to participate in spring ball in an unofficial way, just participated in like meetings, being at the practices, couldn't participate because he was still a high school senior, and then stepped on the field at USC immediately, pretty much immediately to quarterback the Trojans for that season. Unfortunately got hurt the second game, his second season, after going 25 for 34 with a touchdown pass and a pick. So JT Daniels, much anticipated arrival.